is strengthening for me. I'll tell you a secret. I'm officially on vacation. That's a category of employment, but this is for me. This is for me, and this is for you. This is a way of being together in the world that is so vitally important always, and especially now. So I dedicate today's learning, today's 200th episode, to all my colleagues at UJA who are doing untold work. You might know that as the world's largest local philanthropy, we do incredible good, but you can't imagine the dimensions of good we do. And those dimensions of need are growing because what the pandemic has done is exacerbate inequalities that were already there, injustice that was already present. As Isabel Wilkerson says in this incredible book that I'm still immersed in called Caste, she said, so often we recognize the earthquakes that are climactic. You can see what happens. But what scientists have begun to help us understand is that there are precursors. There are earthquakes that are under the crust that are invisible. Well, in the same way that we can see the manifestations of so much that is wrong in society today, those things that have needed tending have always needed tending, and we haven't, as a society, been paying close enough attention. So, when we respond to the murder of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, when we respond to the carelessness with which people are still gathering without masks, when we respond to the cruelty that we see around the world and the growing poverty and homelessness and evictions, those are all real things, but they come because there's a long history to each of them. UJA stands to turn the tide of history. That's what we're here for. We are here to achieve justice and equity and fairness and strength and goodness, not only for the Jewish community, but definitely for the Jewish community, not only in cases of racial justice, but absolutely focused on racial justice, not only in terms of poverty, but absolutely in terms of poverty, and not only to help build Israel more and more and more, but absolutely to be present and to support the Jewish homeland. We have so much work that we are proud to do, and we only get to do this because of you. So I dedicate this learning to my colleagues. I dedicate this teaching to my colleagues and to all of our supporters. And if you find yourself moved, I don't often do this during the teachings, but I'm asking you specifically today. If you are so moved, please make a special gift today. We are in deep need of even more support because the world is in even more deep need of our work. So please do that. Please do that. On this extraordinary moment in our community, let's do that. So here's a little bit of Torah, or a lot of Torah, but maybe we could start with a blessing. You might have heard this one before. Wherever you are, I hope you're singing. So I promised my favorite midrash. We're in Parshat Vayechi, and I shared yesterday that this was my daughter's bat mitzvah just last year, and I'm standing with her on the bima right now. So in Parshat Vayechi, which is the final Torah portion of the book of Genesis, we see the end of one chapter of our story, a very significant one, the chapter that can be defined as the family story, the origins of our nation. And the death of Jacob is incredibly powerful in this week's parsha. It starts, the entire Torah portion begins with Vayechi, and Jacob lived 147 years, 17, the final 17 in Egypt. The midrash picks up on his deathbed, and it's actually not a midrash on a verse, but it's a midrash on the image. So it's sad, of course. Jacob's deathbed is a moment where so much of our story is coming to a close, and his incredible story has it's been so complicating and so emotional and so ragged. I mean, isn't that life sometimes? So Jacob is, in the image of the midrash, Jacob is lying there, and he's full of doubt. Was he enough? And would his children do better than he did? Would his children learn the lessons that he and his ancestors did not? Would they make sure that the world that they helped create would do better than the world they inherited? And I'm asking it in that way because that is our question right now. Are we going to do everything in our power to make sure that our children, our descendants, and if you want to share children with everyone else because you don't have your own children, well, my children are yours because their world is in your hands. And so we have to treat every child as if they're your child. I have to treat every child as if they're my child. And those questions Jacob asked were so intense and so relatable to the rabbis that they created this midrash. They said Jacob was worried. He said, maybe everything I believe in ends with me. Maybe everything I've worked on ends with me. I'm so worried that I wasn't enough, that I didn't give enough, that I didn't do enough. And I'm comforted in the back of my head by my father's words to me on my bar mitzvah, standing on the bima with me. He quoted Rod Stewart, and Rod Stewart's Forever Young, which has the words, "For all the wisdom of a lifetime, no one can ever tell." So that's true. So, whenever, maybe forever from now, we worry, were we enough? The answer is going to be, of course you were, because you gave everything you possibly could. And so that's our challenge, to give everything we possibly can. This is where the rabbis go with that midrash. Jacob is worried at the end of his life. Was he enough? Will his children care deeply enough, the way that he did? And so his children gather around him, and they say words that you and I know very well. They don't actually happen in this week's parsha, but for the rabbis, these words that you and I know well are the ones that Jacob's children comforted him with. And they look at him, Jacob, whose name changed to Israel, to the one who wrestles. And they look at their father and they say, Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Listen, our Father Israel. Your God and our God, it's one. Our God is one. Now you and I might have different ways of thinking about the divine, but speaking personally, my theology, my belief, I believe in a God that is bigger than any definition. And that God is more present when people come together. In fact, we have a traditional way of saying that, Berov ha'am hadrat melech. When more people come together, more of God is present. And so whatever the details of our belief might be, even if there's a healthy dose of atheism in your heart, in our community, because doubt is a crucial part of belief, how glorious it is to hear the rabbis project their own worries, their own doubts, into the heart of our ancestor Jacob. So I want us to take this very seriously, to ask ourselves big questions like, are we enough? Have we done enough? So the answer to the first, are you enough? Yes. Yes. Yes, you are enough. God made you whole. You're enough. Have you done enough? No. Because you are whole, because God gave you a whole soul, you have not done enough. And even when my time comes, I will look back and please God. I will have the same worry probably. I don't want to know for a long time. But was I enough? Yes. Did I do enough? No. No, because there's always more to do. A mystic, it's said, is someone who has an intimation, a hint of the way the world ought to be, and is in pain because the world is so far from how it ought to be, and dedicates her soul towards making every difference they possibly can, knowing the world won't entirely change. So will I have done enough? No. Because there's work for my children to do. And Deborah, I see you. My children are your children. There is work for our children to do. So I want to have this conversation over and over with our holy community, not just today on this 200th time of us gathering, but every moment we possibly can, to remind ourselves we are enough and there is work to do. And the reason why there is hope is because we are coming together to do it. Listen to these teachings of what it is to come together. There's a beautiful teaching from the Talmud. This is from Ta'anit. Ma'esh, just like fire, eno dolek yichidi. Fire doesn't ignite in a lone stick of wood. That's in the ancient world, you needed two. Af divrei Torah ein mitkaymin b'yachidi. So too, words of Torah, the experience of meaning, doesn't happen alone. I could sit and read and speak to the wind, but look what we are. Look what we do. Look what it is to be present in community together. We can't do this alone. It's too much, and it wouldn't work even if it were a smaller amount. Doing this together is the way to do it. Because the opposite is also true. Not only can we create more fire, more love, more warmth, more comfort when we come together, when we transcend social distance and we turn our screens into portals into each other's hearts. Listen to this, because if we don't, ki im yipolu ha'echad yakim et chavero v'ilu ha'echad she'yipol ve'en sheni la'akimo. This is straight from Kohelet, from Ecclesiastes. For should they fall, one can raise the other if two people are together. But woe to the one who is alone and falls with no one to lift them up. You and I are here. You and I are here, and we are lifting each other up. And we have to do that for each other and for the entire world until we are all raised up and there's no one to lift anymore, because we're finally all at the same starting place. We will all have enough on that day. That's the work we're dedicated to do. So on this glorious, miraculous day, where we celebrate learning together 200 times, the first 200 times, we've got more ahead. I want to point out that we've done this with open eyes to a world that is being ravaged by not only a disease, but by carelessness. And I don't mean carelessness only in terms of clumsy care. I mean, we haven't cared enough as a world. What about the countries that can't afford the vaccine? What about the parts of society that don't have access to health? What about someone who's suffering, who's being brought to an ER in Los Angeles yesterday, who's being placed in the gift shop because there aren't any beds? We have got such work ahead to do, my friends. And we have to keep our eyes open as we do it. So I'm asking you to be brave of heart, to enjoy the balloons, to smile and sing and breathe, and be in radical amazement as you see the world that is still beyond beautiful. To see each other present with your eyes closed, because I can see you better sometimes with my eyes closed. I see us all gathered in a glorious hall. No one's in charge. No one's in charge. And everybody gets a chance to speak and feel and hug and hold and be present. But let's build this world, friends. Let's pay attention. Let's pay very close attention. Let's celebrate with balloons. Thank you, Cynthia. Thank you, Kim. Let's appreciate our friends. Thank you, Mark, for supporting this idea. Let's celebrate our colleagues. Let's celebrate people we don't know. Let's even find a way to celebrate those with whom we disagree so we can weave this world back together again. Because in the end, and this is what Jacob teaches us through the hearts and eyes of our ancient rabbis, in the end, we are what we have. You and I, this is what we get. And we are so lucky. And the work will never be done. But it certainly won't be done if we don't do it. So let's take a second before we sing our way into a beautiful, important, sacred day, before we add measures of love and support to a world in need. Let's celebrate. Let's take a second. Breathe it in. Scroll through the beautiful names on your screen and notice each other. Notice each other. I can't tell you to be grateful, but boy, am I grateful. And maybe I can just imagine that you are too, for all that we are together. Alone, this doesn't work. Together, what can't we do? Let's sing a little bit. Thank you for being a part of this community, everyone. I can't wait to see you tomorrow. Special song for today. You might know this one too. One more time. Olam chesed yibanem. Yadonai, nai, nai, Yadonai, nai. Olam chesed yibanem. Yadonai, nai, nai, Adonai, nai. Dear friends, I can't wait to see you tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. Mazel tov. And it's a moment for a blessing, so if you're still here, you can say it with me. We made it. 200. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, shechianu v'kiyamanu v'giyanu lazman hazeh.